Imagine waking at 3 in the morning to a sound you cannot identify. Not mechanical, not natural. Something between a hum and a vibration running through the steel beneath your feet. You check the instruments. Everything reads normal. You step outside and the air is warmer than it should be. The stars look different, though you cannot say how. And somewhere ahead, just past the reach of the floodlights, something massive is moving through the water without making a single wave. That happened to a cargo engineer named Tomas. In 1987, somewhere between the Canary Islands and the Azores, he told his daughter. His daughter told me he never filed a report, never told his captain. He finished his shift, went below deck, and did not sleep for 3 days. When I asked why he kept silent, his daughter said he was not afraid of being disbelieved. He was afraid that describing it would make it more real. I want to talk about fear tonight. Not the kind that arrives in a flash. The slow kind. The kind that grows in the space between what you saw and what you can prove. Lighthouses. Everyone pictures them as romantic. Lonely beacons guiding ships through rough weather. The reality was far more brutal. Before automation, lighthouse keepers lived in conditions that would break most people within weeks. Confined stone rooms. Deafening wind that never stopped. Rations that ran thin. Sleep schedules dictated by the rhythm of the lamp. There was no calling for help. No leaving. You stayed until someone came for you, and sometimes no one came on time. A retired keeper named Angus, who worked a station off the Welsh coast during the 1960s, described the job to a local journalist in terms that stuck with me. He said the hardest part was not the isolation. It was how the isolation changed the way he perceived time. Days blurred. He would lose hours staring at the water without blinking. Once, he became convinced an entire week had passed in what his log proved was a single afternoon. The mind does strange things when severed from every reference point that normally anchors it. One station in particular earned a reputation that persists to this day. 3 keepers arrived for a standard rotation. Supplies came on schedule. Reports were filed normally. Then, without transition, the reports stopped. When authorities finally reached the station, they found coats still hanging by the door, a chair overturned. One clock stopped at a time that did not correspond to any known event. No bodies, no farewell. The investigation lasted years and produced nothing conclusive. Theories ranged from a collective psychological break to an argument that escalated beyond recovery. A local woman named Fiona, who cleaned the station between rotations, told investigators something that never made it into the official report. She said the walls of that lighthouse always felt damp on the inside, even during dry spells. And the damp had a smell. Not salt, not mildew. Something organic. Something that reminded her, though she could not explain why, of breath. Let me shift direction entirely. There is a particular kind of maritime incident that does not involve disappearance at all. It involves return. Ships that come back wrong. A vessel docks after a routine voyage, and everything checks out on paper, but the crew behaves differently. Small things. A sailor who previously loved the water now refuses to look at it. An officer who kept meticulous records suddenly cannot recall basic details of the trip. These subtle fractures rarely make headlines because there is nothing concrete to report, no wreckage to photograph, no casualty to document. Just people who left as one version of themselves and returned as another. A retired naval psychologist named Dr. Eleanor Voss spent 11 years interviewing merchant sailors who reported what she clinically termed displacement episodes, periods during routine voyages where individuals experience discontinuities in their perception, gaps in memory, sensory distortions, the conviction that the ship had briefly been somewhere fundamentally different from its charted position. She collected over 200 interviews. What disturbed her was not the content of the experiences, which varied wildly, but the emotional texture. Almost every subject, regardless of nationality, education, or years at sea, used the same word when pressed to describe how the episode felt. They said it felt borrowed, as though the experience had belonged to someone else and had been placed inside them by mistake. Dr. Voss never published her findings. Her notes were donated to a university archive after her death and remain largely unexamined. I have read 19 of those transcripts. They are clinical, precise, and profoundly unsettling. People assume the most frightening thing about deep water is what might be living in it. Teeth in the darkness, tentacles reaching upward. I understand the appeal of that fear because it gives the threat a shape. Something with a body can be studied, classified, avoided. What cannot be avoided is formlessness. The deep ocean is not a habitat the way a forest is a habitat. Below a certain depth, the concept of place begins to dissolve. There is no landmark, no horizon, no up or down without instruments to confirm it. Pressure becomes so immense that the human body would be crushed before the brain could register pain. We have sent cameras down there. They have recorded things. Organisms that produce their own light in patterns that seem almost deliberate. Structures on the ocean floor that resist easy geological explanation. Sounds captured by deep-sea hydrophones that do not match any known biological or mechanical source. One recording, made in the late 1990s, captured a low-frequency sound so powerful it was detected by sensors thousands of miles apart. Scientists attributed it to an ice quake, a massive fracture in an Antarctic ice shelf. That explanation satisfied most people. But a sound engineer named Martin, who spent his career analyzing acoustic signatures for industrial applications, told a podcast in 2014 that the frequency profile did not match any ice fracture he had ever studied. He described it as structured, not random. He was careful to say he was not claiming anything. He simply could not reconcile the data with the explanation. Here is what stays with me about all of this. Not the individual incidents, not the specific details of who vanished or what was heard or which ship came back different. What stays with me is the pattern of silence that follows. Tomas never told his captain. Angus stopped working lighthouses and never explained why to his family. Dr. Voss never published. Martin made his observation once and never repeated it publicly. These are not people chasing attention, they are people retreating from something. And the direction of that retreat tells you more than any testimony ever could. There is a phrase that sailors in the Portuguese merchant fleet use to whisper among themselves. I heard it from Tomas through his daughter and later found variations of it in 3 separate oral history collections spanning different decades. Roughly translated, it goes something like this: do not ask the deep what it saw, it will show you. I have spent a long time collecting accounts like these, filing them, cross-referencing dates and coordinates, looking for the seams where one story touches another. What I have found is not a grand theory. It is not a monster or a curse or a doorway to another dimension. What I have found is a consistent wound in human experience, a place where language fails and memory distorts, and confident people become quiet. The deep water doesn't care about our categories. It doesn't distinguish between superstition and science. It operates on principles we have not identified, in darkness we have not mapped, at pressures we cannot survive. Every expedition we send down returns with more questions than it carried. Every instrument we lower into the abyss measures something it was not designed to measure. I do not think the ocean is hostile. Hostility requires awareness of a target. What I think is far worse. The ocean is indifferent in a way that is so total, so absolute, that our presence within it registers as nothing. We are not intruders. We are not prey. We are not even noticed. And somehow that indifference produces effects that look, from our small and desperate perspective, exactly like malice. The next time you stand at the edge of the shore and watch the waves roll in, notice how your mind automatically assigns them a rhythm, a pattern, a predictability. That is your brain doing what it always does, constructing order from chaos so you can feel safe. But watch long enough and the rhythm breaks. A wave arrives too early. A gap stretches too long. For just a moment, the pattern collapses, and you see the water as it actually is, not hostile, not welcoming, not anything that has a word. That moment right there is where every story I have told you tonight begins.